see. So Melissa, did you have any questions at this point or additional tools? Then I'll give sort of examples of how it can be used for core curriculum and then tactile literacy development.
No, I think the ideas are out there, and it's just about allowing, the exploration of your child. With the textures, and although they have the adhesive, if I remember correctly, the majority of the backing is white, and so I've used a black permanent marker to provide that high contrast for the kids who are working on scissor skills to really highlight what it is that they're wanting to create per se. So this is just another option to support.
Excellent idea. Thanks for mentioning that.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm just going to go and just give you sort of a pictorial tour of some options just to be thinking about. So in terms of core curriculum support, using those same materials, so here, say you're practicing Braille skills, and what is the fun way to introduce that using some of the materials that we showed earlier. So if you're familiar with the Pop-A-Cell, these are just little cards. They're probably about 4 by 2.5 or something, and it has sort of these pop bubbles that they can practice building their Braille letters. Anyway, I just sort of dissected one of those apart and took the backing off there and created this stencil or template for a Braille cell, and then placed that down onto your picture maker Beltex surface. And then using some of those little geometric shapes that comes with that kit. In that case, there's some little pink circular pieces, felt texture. And say you're practicing the letter E, student can put the little shapes into the stencil against that felt board to create their Braille letter. And then similar to that, you can take the quick draw paper that I have here, put that stencil down on the quick draw paper and have the student take their marker and color in the circles that create that Braille letter and have it raised instantly. So just something really quick and easy and cheap to do. Okay. In terms of practicing some science concepts, here's where we took some carousel texture materials and built the anatomical parts of a bumblebee. So you have a lot of different, where the felt is built up onto the yellow layer of foam, and then using sort of that translucent textured material, we created the wings, and then you can add on your Braille labels and print labels if you need to. Using the tactile doodle, you can do more sophisticated concepts, and here you have the nerve cell, and you can look at the dendrite and the nucleus and whatever you want to draw to quickly convey that concept. You can take Picture Maker and have some fun drawing constellations with the felt dots being your stars, and then you can link the stars together with the little strips to build your constellation shape. Okay. Geometry. I just took that all-in-one board, positioned it for the magnetic side of the board, and then we do have textured sorting circle shapes. It's a big long name for a product, but they're all different textures and magnetic geometric shapes. Of course, you can use whatever shapes you have that are magnetic backed, and then create sort of a repeating pattern or tessellation with that on the board. So students, again, can just create as much as they want to or how they like to design their own graphic. Here's an example of a tactile tangram. I took the graphic art tape and just created just the outline of the puzzle. Again, I just applied that, I think, to just a yellow sheet of foam material, so you get a good contrast between the smooth foam material and the crepe texture graphic art tape. And then you can take the 7 basic tactile tangram shapes and put them, or have the student put those into the puzzle. And then you can use the Beltex side or felt board side of the all-in-one board. And here you have different angles, geometric angles shown from acute to right angle and so forth on there. Symmetry is a very commonplace concept to convey, and you can do that in a very artistic way. So here I took a tactile image of butterfly, cut it in half, and of course you're showing the vertical line of symmetry here. And you can place half of that sheet down on top of the film, and then the student can just draw the other half of the butterfly onto the film to practice that concept of symmetry. Here I've taken and cut out an hourglass shape from the corrugated material that's offered in Carousel Textures, and then using the sensible strips that have a very directional line to them, presented both the horizontal and vertical lines of symmetry on top of that hourglass shape. Graphing, this is just something I bumped into just experimenting with the Tactile Doodle. But if you purchase or go to any craft store, and I think everybody's familiar with needlepoint canvas, I just cut it down to size to fit onto that board, and then put the drawing film on top of the needlepoint canvas. And what that affords is if you take the drawing stylus and just, especially the pointed end, and just run that tool along any of those lines within the needlepoint canvas, it just follows along perfectly through those little detents within the needlepoint canvas, and you can create like little graph sheets if you like. And then once you turn it over, you can take some foam strips and maybe present a data path line onto top of that real bold dotted line that you generated through this version. So even if the student just wanted to freely doodle, you don't even have to do a graph. You can use this particular presentation where you just put the needlepoint canvas down on that material and then draw freehand whatever shapes. It has a good auditory feedback when you're drawing onto that needlepoint canvas as well. You can do some maps. So obviously this is just sort of a cul-de-sac with some houses around there in the road. But using the picture maker pieces, I think it's fun for students to create their own tactile mazes. So you're building a lot of tactile tracking skills. So here I've taken the picture maker strips along with the geometric shapes and positioned a very obvious starting location and then an ending location with the X, felt red X, and then just made it little obstacles where kind of detours, so they do have to pay attention and try to find the best path from the start to the finish. But keep in mind that, have students, encourage your student or child to create their own mazes for you to figure out and share with peers as
I think
well.
that'd be so fun.
Yeah, and it can be far more complicated than that, but that was just a simple one that's presented. Another idea, if you're teaching music, again, you can take those little geometric shapes and draw the little music notes, little rhinestones. You can download some here. I took one of those free downloadable images from the Tactile Image Library of a guitar, and then had that printed version available, and then you can duplicate that onto the tactile drawing film and have an instant raised line drawing of that particular thing. And the third option here is taking your tactile graphic line slate, and I just tooled a music staff and took some, I think that was just wiki stick to do the treble clef symbol. So just some options there. And then this is getting into more expanded core curriculum ideas that when you think about tactile graphics, especially, usually tactile graphics are built from those four main sort of ingredients, if you will. You have your point symbols or basic shapes, you have your textures, you have your lines, and of course you have your braille. So you want to start exposing your child to a lot of different versions of those different shapes and textures and line paths, and get them familiar with all the different ways that they may encounter those. So some ideas for that is taking, here I have, this is not APH product, but it's included with Setting the Stage, which is an APH product, where we offer some wiki stick. And in that kit, we offer 3D objects. And in this case, it's a ball and a cube and a puzzle piece. So the student, to sort of jumpstart their understanding of how you transition from the 3D object to just a flat two-dimensional shape, you can take wiki stick and start wrapping around that 3D object, and then just gently remove that outline and place it flat on a page. So they start to understand, oh, that's why a cube is drawn as a square, because that's what we visually typically represent a cube to be. Or, oh, that's why a ball is sometimes drawn as just a simple raised line circle. That's the shape that it transfers to. So that's some just a art kind of related activity, but also for the purpose of really jump starting that transition from 3D object to 2D understanding. Same thing here where you take some flat platform shapes, if you will, of a star or a square or a circle, and you place those shapes down onto your tactile drawing film and use your stylus. The student can trace around those images and then understand how that converts from this raised line, or I'm sorry, this raised platform shape to a raised line image. This was sort of my feeble attempt. I was trying to see if it would work, but just cut out a shape from that quick draw paper, put it into water, let it fully expand to almost make a little stamp that, and then just I put some paint on it and then pressed it down on some quick draw paper so that it raised up a little bit. So you can experiment with that. It's sort of fun to do. Here are some examples of using the color by texture marking mats to transfer the textures that we talked about in terms of rough and bumpy and striped and wavy. But also keep in mind that because those textured mats are translucent, your student might benefit from maybe using those in unison with a light box to get that visual contrast there too. So you can place those onto the white box and then it will show through your coloring page. So good way to talk about textures. Also using those color by texture marking mats, you can take Play-Doh or clay and the student can just press them into that texture and transfer and make interesting textures from that. Or take some, we sell some aluminum diagramming foil, and what I do just for safety purposes, because it does typically have a sharp edge, I take just some masking tape and create usually a different color too, and create a border or a frame that protects the child from that sharp edge of the aluminum diagramming foil. But then you can put that on top of, in this case, like the zigzag textured marking mat, and then just use any kind of tool. This is just a wooden sculpting tool, and then transfer that pattern into the foil, which is kind of fun to do. Line paths to really encourage tracking and understanding all the different types of line paths that they might encounter in tactile graphic, whether it's stair-stepped or wavy or sort of this railroad line. Eventually you can take those sensible strips once they're available and create, because they do bend, you can imitate some of those line types onto a piece of paper and have students practice tracking left to right and following these very unique pathways as they would encounter in just a tactile graphic. Positional concepts, you can take the picture maker board and almost like a stick man figure, practice understanding, which are more complex understanding of perspective, like top front view, side view, and so forth. And I just drew little stick men here, like a little guy kicking a ball, and we're standing with his hands on their hips or their legs and arms spread apart. So you can, the student can do some fun things like that. This other image is just pretend that's like an abstract drawing or whatever. You can take that drawing that the student creates and really emphasize positional concepts. Talk about what objects are above or below another, or beside or inside and outside. Really drive home those spatial understanding concepts that are going to be crucial to the understanding of and navigating tactile graphics. Perspective, as I mentioned, is probably one of the harder concepts to understand because, you know, from a sighted perspective, when we do drawings, we impose our viewpoints of how we encounter an object. And so trying to understand, why do we show an apple, like a raised line drawing of an apple in this way, but to marry and to always present that real object first and then do the drawing. And here's, I believe this is from the Lightbox materials. It's just a stencil of an apple. So they can take the stencil, put it onto the tactile drawing film, and take the tool and create their own little drawing of an apple onto that film. And then you can just take any object. Here I have a little cat model, and then just press it into clay or Play-Doh to understand how something is shown from a side view, and maybe find some interesting objects that really translate into different impressions, either from the top view or side view perspective. And then lastly, this is my last slide. This is just showing a smattering of ways, just open-ended self-expression types of opportunities using any of those tools. I have a picture maker board here where it's a little wagon and a smiley face is drawn, sort of along the lines of the mazes. Have students do some fun activities where, for instance, find the differences. So using the picture maker pieces, you can draw a dividing line and then do some whimsical little faces that change or differ in just real subtle ways, whether it's the eyebrow position or the mouth position, and have them focus and really use their hands to decide through texture or position what's different. And you've already countered the house drawing. And then on this other last slide here, I just took some magnetic pieces and drew some stylized flowers. So again, just open-ended activities there. So I'll just pause there. I'll leave my email address up there if you ever have any questions related to these products. And feel free to, I want to, before I forget, APH always has different products that we're field testing, and we want to make sure that parents are involved in those field test opportunities. So the best way you can find those new announcements of new products being field tested is to go to our APH website and look up Get Involved. And under that heading, you'll find all types of opportunities for field testing. I have one up there right now for just some grid activities. So we always want parents involved in field testing as well. So keep us in mind. It's lots of fun. You just give us your feedback after you use the product with your student or child, and just help us make the best products possible before we send them out. So thanks for your time, and I hope you learned a little bit of something new, and maybe expand your option for your students' drawing opportunities. Thank
Karen,
you.
I think this was phenomenal. I mean, I think about, my perspective for starting with anything arts. You always think, paint, you think mess, you think all of that. And honestly, it doesn't have to be. And again, it's taking all the tactile pieces and using them in such a variety of ways that, I mean, I loved the comparison and the, find the differences. And again, I go back to, what can you do after school in the evening is some of those game nights or those fun activities between siblings. And so much of what you offered really lends itself to, I hate to say that, tech-free time that we're all searching for now.
Yeah, and I just want to emphasize that they're really simple products to use. Like, they don't take a lot of time to even pick up and figure out how to use. So yeah, and hopefully we'll be able to offer more. I know it's not a grand amount of products, but it certainly, offers something to start with if you need to.
I think it's wonderful, Karen, and I can't thank you enough for sharing all of your expertise and your ideas and ways to use what we do have to expand creativity of our children. So thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Absolutely.